Should you update your music computer to the latest operating system? Apple's just released Ventura, their latest operating system, and you're probably pretty excited to try out some of the new features. I know I am. But should you do it? No, wait a little while. And I'm going to give you some practical reasons why you shouldn't update just yet, but also a few philosophical things that might help you change your mindset and realize how the desire to update to something new could actually be hurting your music production. So the biggest reason, practically speaking, is there's really just too many moving parts in our music production systems. And it's not just your DAW. They may already be supporting the new operating system, but you also have to remember you have lots of plugins that you probably rely on, and each one of those manufacturers needs some time to iron out the bugs and the compatibility issues to make sure that their plugins work with your DAW on the new operating system. Whatever apps you might use to make music, they all have to work as well. You have hardware, you have gear, you have interfaces that might need firmware updates in order to work. There's just too many things working all at once for you to take that risk early in the release of a new operating system. I recommend checking out Sweetwater. They've got a really nice and thorough breakdown of what companies are supporting the new operating system, which ones are not yet. So I recommend you check in with Sweetwater on that. I'll leave the link in the show notes. But also, let some of the more brave and daring producers try first. There's definitely people out there that want to be the first, that want to check things out, that want to test things. And while I think they're possibly a little crazy for doing so, I'm really thankful they do, because they're the ones that are finding out what a lot of the problems are. So thank you if you're one of those people. And if you are, please let us know what you have experienced, what issues you've found, what's working, what's not. That's how we ultimately determine whether or not we're going to update ourselves. But I don't think it's a good idea for everybody. If you are going to be brave enough to do that, you got to keep in mind that you will probably run into some technical issues, some incompatibilities, some mysterious behaviors. All of that is going to take away from your music making time. So unless you're prepared to do a lot of troubleshooting, testing things, perhaps even corresponding with different manufacturers and companies, you might want to wait so you don't have to deal with that. Think of the few hours it might take you to figure out why something's not working inside your computer. That's a few hours you could have had making music. There could have been a beautiful piece of music that you made that doesn't exist because you're playing around with what works and what doesn't in the new operating system. And whatever you do, even if the system has been approved, everyone's saying everything's compatible, I don't think it's a good idea to update your computer and your software when you're in the middle of any kind of important project. If you're working on an album, if you're doing something for a client, it's not a good idea to put that entire body of work at risk. You might get lucky and everything works, but you might run into problems too, and it might just be a matter of going back and reinstalling the operating system. But worst case scenario, you might not be able to do that, and you might wind up losing work. And that's the worst thing that could happen. There's no new feature that's worth losing your work. So if you're in the middle of a project, definitely wait before updating. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If things are working well for you, leave them as is. Finish your project, get it done, get the work done, get paid, make your album, do whatever you got to do. But don't fix something that's not broken. Save that for when you have a little bit of free time to mess around with potential problems. You have to figure in the fact that you will run into issues when making music on a computer. Things just stop working sometimes. So build that into your overall schedule and don't let it interfere with important projects. Now, those are some practical reasons, but let's talk about some of the philosophical stuff, like what's really happening in our mind when we're craving the new update, when we're trying to improve our systems. The truth is, you already have enough. You have enough tools to make great music. You don't need some new feature on the operating system. You don't need a new piece of software. You don't need new hardware. If you just have a computer with any basic recording software, you've got plenty. You don't need the fanciest setup in the world to make great music. In fact, time and time again, I've seen people make amazing music on way simpler setups than I have, and they deal with far fewer problems of compatibility, setup, connecting things. It's much easier to make music on a simpler system. The more you add new things in, the more you complicate the process. It's not going to make your hit for you. You already have enough, and craving the new thing makes you subconsciously feel like maybe you need something else before you can move forward, and that's simply not true. This might also be a chance to feel grateful. We don't think about how nice it is to have equipment that works, to have a setup that works when everything's running smoothly. We don't really sit down and say, all right, this is wonderful. It's not usually until things start breaking down that we start realizing how lucky we were when things were working. Rather than craving the new operating system, maybe take a moment to just appreciate the fact that things are working fairly well for you right now, and go make use of that while it's happening. Because when they aren't working well, you're going to wish you could go right back to this moment now before you updated your operating system and had a working computer and software. It's like when we get sick. You don't usually walk around feeling good about not having a runny nose, not having a headache, but when you get those things, you really miss the way it felt before you had it, when you were healthy. And I think the same thing can be said about our computers. Maybe use this opportunity to transform that lust and desire for the newest operating system into a sense of appreciation for what you already have and for what already works. Wanting new things takes us out of the moment. We think now about the future and how things will be better when we have that thing. And it lessens our appreciation for all the stuff we already have. When we're desiring new things, the value of the things we have is lessened. And we don't want that. We want to actually appreciate the tools we have and all the stuff at our disposal. When we feel excited about that stuff, we tend to use it and we tend to make great things with it. Try to transform that desire for something new into the feeling of gratitude for what you already have. We as humans have this psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation. We want things, and then when we get them, we're excited at first, but it sort of wears off after a while. We love the thing for a minute or two, and then the next minute, we're off to desiring the next thing. We get used to what we have. Think about it like this. Everything you already have right now, your computer, your setup, your gear, your hardware, whatever it is you use to make music, at one point, you wanted to have all of that stuff. You thought that would be the stuff that would make you make great music or help you to make great music. But after a while, you probably just got used to having it. And then some of those things you were excited about start to gather dust. In fact, I listened back to an old episode of this podcast where I recommended not updating to Mac Catalina about 4 years ago. And I mentioned a few features that I was excited about that I've never really used. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. But the thing is, I desired it. I wanted to have it. But in reality, I didn't need it. And I think the same thing could probably be said about a lot of the new things that are coming out now that we really want. Maybe you don't really need them. Maybe you just want them. Think about all of the things you already have. At one point, you really did desire to have those things. So try to renew that appreciation. You have it now. You can use it now. So take that time to use it. Have fun with it. Play with the things that maybe you got that you didn't give enough attention to. Look into your plugins or your samples for things you haven't really used yet. Try to channel that desire for the new thing into the stuff you already have. And it might give you a little bit more excitement about your next project and your next session, because you're going to play around with things that you didn't really give enough love to in the first place. Well, there you have it. I don't recommend updating just yet. It's still about a week since the new operating system came out. Give it a little time. Let companies figure out the bugs. Let the more adventurous and perhaps slightly crazy people that want to try this stuff out do that. And then wait for their findings. See what issues they run into. And when you start seeing on the forums, say, when they're not really reporting issues, they're saying things are running fine, then you might consider it. And again, I do recommend that site on Sweetwater's page. They really do a wonderful job. This is not a promotion or anything. I just think it's an excellent resource for all of us. All DAWs and plugins pretty much that I could think of are listed there. So thanks so much for listening to the Music Production Podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you think the information here is valuable at all, please share it with anyone else that you think might enjoy it too. I'd really appreciate that. And if you are one of those crazy, wild, living on the edge souls that have updated to the latest software, that are moving ahead with their computer's operating system, let us know what's happening. What have you noticed? What's working? What's not working? Any major issues? Anything we should look out for? Thanks for doing this, because this is how companies also figure things out. They need people testing their stuff. I just don't think it's a great idea for everybody, because you don't want to stall your work and run into problems. So wait, enjoy the stuff you have. You already have all the tools at your disposal. After some time has passed, then you might check out what's going on with everything and decide to update then. That's fine. But until now, I recommend you wait. Thanks a lot for listening, and have a great day.